Hi, everyone. Can everyone hear me? Just want to. Okay, awesome. The audio is working. All right, awesome. So, first of all, thank you for turning up for the second session of this Intro to Data Science class. So, what we're going to have a packed agenda today, but I just want to do a couple of housekeeping things and then updates so that for those who are joining us are on the same page as the students we had in the first class. But just some housekeeping updates here. So my name is GPAL. I'm a self-taught programmer. And back in March, I taught a 4-week Python course. And last week, we ran a Intro to Python for Absolute Beginners class. And this class is going to be focused on the data science components. We're going to be learning packages like NumPy and Pandas. So that's going to be the focus for this session. So I just described that very quickly in the previous slide. And just to all those fathers in the audience, something special. Happy Father's Day to all of you all in the audience who are fathers. And I also wanted to say a big thank you to all those who contributed to our Discord server, and special mention to Non-Standard Deviation, who was extremely helpful and answering questions and sharing resources with everybody. So thank you, everyone, and special thanks to Non-Standard Deviation. So I'm not going to go through this. So for those who are new, who didn't join the session last week, the coding development environment that we use is Replit. So if you don't have an account, go ahead, create it. It just takes you a minute. So do that right now. So the nice thing about Replit, for those who aren't familiar with it, is that it allows you to code on the browser itself. You don't have to download anything. And the nice thing is it allows you to share your code easily. When we get to that component, I'm going to show how that works. And the best line is that it's free. So that's wonderful. So if you haven't set up Replit, just go ahead, do it. I just want to get a sense. How many of you all attended the class previously? If you attended, okay, give me a second. Let me see. Okay, so let me frame it this way. For how many of you all is this the first class that you're attending? If so, just write something out in the chat section. Okay, it seems like most of you all attended the previous class. Okay, that's awesome. Okay, great. So I'm not going to spend time on Replit anymore. Discord, for those who are new, is the place that we essentially discuss questions together and work on problems. So if you haven't signed up yet, this is the link, but it seems like, okay. So if you haven't signed up for a Discord server, this is the link. Go ahead, sign up. This is where we'll be discussing the problem sets that we are going to be working on for this session. Okay, great. So let me just hold this for another 10 more seconds, and then we can get to coding today. Okay, cool. So let's start coding. Let's get to Replit. So you go to Replit. So this is going to be so this is how Replit looks like for those who are new. If you have set up a new account, what you do is that you go to this section, this button at the bottom, you click it, and you scroll down to Python 3, which is the version that we're going to be using. And if you are new, I just want to highlight two things very quickly. First of all, if you press this button, the code would execute. And if you want to share your code with somebody else, you just click this, and you go to our Discord server app, and you go specifically to the programming exercises channel, and you can paste it. But I don't have anything here to paste, so I'm not going to paste it. So that's a little bit of intro for those who are new. Okay, great. So we're going to be focusing on NumPy and Pandas today. But before that, I want to run through lists and the way that they work, because having a good grasp of how lists work is going to be helpful when you access data within NumPy and Pandas. So we're going to understand a little bit more about how lists work. So that's going to be the focus for the first part of today's class. So suppose I want to create a list. Say I create this variable called list1. And what I do to create a list is I open it up with a square bracket, and then I can insert whatever I want. In this case, let's say I just want to insert some floats. Let's put 5.0, 3.3, 6.7, 3.2. So essentially what I did here was that I initialized this variable called list1, and I assigned it 4 different floats. So that's what we just did. We just created a list essentially. And now if I want to print out the list, I can just say print list1 and hit run. Oh, and another thing, try to practice along. I'm going to have practice exercises and special segments where we can ask questions, and work on the specific problem sets. But even as I run through these exercises, just try to do them with me. That's going to help you understand the concept a lot better. Okay, so essentially we just created a list here. That's it. Now, if I want to understand the type of what I just created, I can put type list1. I can press run. It tells me that I just created something, which is a list. That makes perfect sense. Now, the thing about a list is that you can have things of you can have different data types. So you don't necessarily need to have just put in integers or floats or strings inside a list. You can have multiple data types. So imagine I create this list called states, and let's say, okay, I'm going to skip a couple of states. Let's say Alaska, Arkansas, California. I'm going to skip Colorado. Let's just have Delaware, right? And then let's say accidentally I insert the number 7, right? This list is still completely permissible. The list takes on objects of different types. So even though all these four elements are strings, it's perfectly fine that the last element is an integer. It's not going to throw up an error. So that's something about a list that you need to be aware of. And let's say I want to print out this list called states. I just put print states, and I see this whole list being printed up. Now, suppose I want to remove a specific element within the list. What I do is that I say, look, states dot remove 7. Right? I want to remove it, and then I want to print it again. So let's see what happens. You see that it takes it away. Awesome. Now, suppose we want to add something to the list. Let's say we want to add the state New York. Right? We're jumping the alphabetical order. It's fine. States dot append, and then we just have a parentheses, and then we can put NY. And just to check that we have printed out the right, we've appended New York. Let's print out the list again. Okay, and let's try that. All right, awesome. You find that it appends it to the end of the list. Okay, so we know how to create a list. We know how to remove elements from the list. We know how to append things to the new elements to the end of the list. Suppose we want to access these elements. Let's say we want to know what's the first element in the list. Right, I'm just going to neaten this out. Just put New York here. Okay, so I want to obtain the first element of the list. So how do I obtain the first element of the list? Okay, and to do that, what I do is I just say print, I say states, and then I open up the square brackets and I put in 0. Now this may seem a bit peculiar. Why am I putting in 0 instead of 1? So the way Python works is that it starts counting elements with 0. So this element is going to be 0, this element is going to be 1, this element is going to be 2, Delaware is going to be 3, New York is going to be 4, even though it's the 5th element in the row. So that's just the way Python works. So if I want to obtain the first element of the list, I just put in states and 0 in brackets, and let's see what happens. Right, awesome, I'm getting AL, which is great. Now, suppose we want to get multiple states from the list, right? One of the things that we could do is we could say, okay, I want the first one, I want this, I could do it, and then I could keep on doing this, but this is kind of silly. It keeps, we have to repeat code, and we want to avoid doing that. So suppose, how do we obtain multiple elements from the list? The way that you do that is, once again, print states. You have your square brackets, and then what you do is the element that you want to start with and the element that you want to end with. Let's see what happens here. Okay, awesome. So it starts with 0, right? But then this is interesting. This end element is excluded. So this is 0, gets printed out. This is 1, it gets printed out. This is 2, it gets printed out. But then you find that this is the element number 3 in terms of Python's count, but that gets excluded. So that's something that you need to be aware of. So the start element is included, but the end element that you include in the list is excluded. So that's something that you need to take note when you try to print out multiple lists, multiple elements of the list. So far we have created what is called a one-dimensional list, in the sense that it's flat list, right? But it's also possible to create a list within a list. So let me show you what I mean by that. So let's comment everything out here. Let me just take it out, in fact. All right. So one of the things that we can do is that we can create a list within a list. Right? Let me say list within a list. Let's call it 2D list here. So suppose I create this variable called state growth, which contains states and their economic growth, right? So this is a list within a list. So let's say I say AL is growing at 2% per year. And then let's say I say that CA is growing at 5%. So essentially what I'm doing here is that I'm creating a list within a list. And what we could, and accessing elements is going to be a little trickier than what we did previously. So, and let me show you what I mean by that. Okay, so just to simplify, we have, so this is a list within a list, right? And let's see how we can access different elements. Okay. Just to make sure we got everything right, let's just print this 2D list to see what we've got. Okay, awesome. So it's a list within a list. Great. Now, suppose I want to know how much growth California has been experiencing. How would I go about answering that question? So here's the question: how much growth is California experiencing? So we need to subset the list. So let's see how we can do that. So first of all, we need to identify the row, right? In this case, California is 1. So Alabama, this is 0, 1, 2. So we put in 1. And then after we have located this specific list, we know that the growth numbers are in the first element, because this is element 0, this is element 1. So we put in 0. And let's see whether we get the right number. Wait a second. Oops, sorry. I needed to put this here. Okay. No joke. Oops, sorry. There we go. Sorry. So it's saying let's locate list number 1, and within the list, let's locate the growth numbers, which are the first element based on Python's calculation. Now, does anybody have any questions about this? If you have any questions, post it on the YouTube's section, the YouTube's chat section, or our Discord server app, and I can answer it right now. Okay, so that is just a very quick primer on lists and 2D lists. So I have a couple of exercises here. I'm going to share those with you right now. So let me share that on our Discord server app. So this is the first exercise of the day. It's just to test the concept of lists and make sure that you have gotten it right. So spend about 15 minutes on it, and then we'll get back, discuss this, and then we can move on to NumPy. So I've shared the link on our Discord server app. So take about 15 minutes. We're going to come back at about 3 o'clock, discuss this. And if you're done with this exercise, feel free to share your code with others. That was something that was really fun last week, when people shared their work with others. And if you have any questions, now is the right time, the best time to post it on the YouTube channel or our Discord server app. All right, so we already have some answers streaming in. So one of the questions I had was, when will the recording of this session be posted? It will be immediately after this session is over. YouTube does it almost instantly. I want to do a pulse check here. Do you think it would be nice if I play some background music, or do you prefer silence while coding? Okay, silence. Okay, sure. So take another 10 minutes, and then we're going to come back at 3. Okay, sure, silence. Silence it shall be. Sure. Okay, 5 more minutes, and then we're gonna come back, discuss this, discuss these questions, and then we're gonna move on to NumPy. Just 5 more minutes. Two more minutes, and then we'll get back. Okay, 1 more minute, and then we're gonna get back. Okay, let's get back. So this was, let me get back to my question list. Okay, cool. So this was the first exercise. Let's get back to the main screen, folks. Okay, so this was the variable. It was called list num, and it had all these different integers in this case. And the first question was, how do we print out the second element within the list? That's pretty straightforward. If we want the second element, what we do is that we actually put in 1, because that's how Python calculates it. So put it here, let's put 1. Because the way Python calculates it, it's that this is 0 and this is 1, which is the second element. So we just put in 1, and let's check if it works. Awesome, it works, great. So now what do we do if we want to append something? We just say list num dot append key in 7. Right, and just to make sure that we got it right, let's just print out the list after that. Okay, let's comment this. Okay. Yep, we find that 7 is appended at the end of the list, which is great. Good. Now, how do we print out the last 3 elements within the list? So the way, I think some people were a bit confused about this. Let me show you how it's done. So print list num. And one way to do this, I mean, this isn't the only way to do it, but I think this is quite an elegant way of doing it, is to put in -3 here. So Python has a negative counter as well. So it says this -1, -2, -3. And then, so this is the start. And then the end, when we leave it empty, it just says go all the way till the end of the list. So let's see what happens when we enter this. So this is our new list after 7 was appended, and it should output 2, 4, 7 if we get this right. Let's see. Yep, and it does do that. So this is, once again, this isn't the only way of doing it, but this is a way, and I think quite an elegant way of solving this. So this is how we output the last 3 elements within the list. Okay, so now over here we have a 2D list, and the first question is for this 2D list is print the score that the first student in the list received. So the first student is Alex, and by right we need to get 97 as the result. So the way that we do that is we say, okay, print score, test scores. We need to locate Alex. So that's the 0th row, and within the 0th row, the score is going to be 1. So we put in 1. Let's see if we get 97. We should get 97. We get 97. Great. The next question is print the name of the second student in the test scores list. So Bob is the student. So you go print test scores. Bob is number 1. And we want the name, which is the 0th element within that list itself. So we would put 0 here. Right. And then we get Bob. So any questions about that before we move on to NumPy arrays? So last chance to ask questions about lists. All right. Last 20 seconds. Otherwise, we can move on to NumPy arrays. Okay, so let's get to NumPy arrays. So the thing that you need to understand is that you need to, the most important thing about lists is that you need to understand how you subset lists. And what I mean by that is that you need to know how to extract certain elements from the list. And that's going to come in handy when you work with arrays and other different data structures later on. So that's just a very foundational concept you need to understand. Okay. Okay, awesome. So let's get to NumPy array. So the thing about lists is that you can't do mathematical computations on lists, and let me explain what I mean by that. So imagine you have two lists here. Okay, so imagine I have stock market data. I've got, let's say, the data for 4 companies. Okay, I've got data for companies. Let's say I have a list called earnings, and let's say all the numbers here are in the billions. Okay. Right, and let's say I put in 3.2, $3.2 billion, $5.6 billion, $3.4 billion, and $3.2 billion. Okay. And let's say we also have another variable called number of shares, also in the billions, 2 billion shares, 7 billion shares. Let's say I want to put 1.6 billion shares and 1.4 billion shares. Now, suppose I want to calculate the earnings per share, right? How do I go about doing that? The problem with lists is that if I do something like this, let me show you. This is going to throw me an error. Earnings per share equal earnings divided by number of shares. It's going to throw me an error, and let's see what's the error that I get. What does it say? It says that when you have 2 lists, you can't divide over. You can't just say 3.2 divided by 1.6. It doesn't allow us to do that, and that's a serious limitation. And that's going to, you want to be able to do mathematical operations on your elements so that you can have better data. You can do better analysis there. So that's a limitation with lists, and that's where NumPy comes in. So NumPy is a package, and the simplified definition of package is that it's kind of like a repository of different functions, and you can access those functions. So that's just a very simplified definition of a package. So let me show you how we can solve the same problem using NumPy. Right? So we know that this throws us an error, so that's fine. We don't want this. So what we do is we first of all import NumPy. So we need to import NumPy. And the way that you go about importing it is you just say import NumPy as NP. Now, what am I doing here? So essentially NumPy is 5 characters, and let's say I don't want to refer to it by the 5 characters. I'm creating an alias here, right? That's what I'm doing. Instead of as NP, I could put as NPY, I could put something else, but this is just a convention. So in this case, let's stick with the convention, import NumPy as NP. And then what I need to do is that I need to take this list and transform it into a NumPy array. And let me show you how that works. So NumPy, I create a new variable called NumPy earnings equal NP dot array, and then I pass in this list. So that's what I'm going to do here. Right? I'm going to pass in this list. Okay, to do that, and let's say I want to check the type of this new variable that I just created, right? So I go print type NumPy NP earnings. Okay, and let's see what we got. Okay, so it tells me that it's a NumPy ND array. Okay, great. Okay, cancel this. And let's do the same thing for the number of shares. Okay, NP shares equal NP.array number of shares. Okay, so we have created these new variables, and these are NumPy arrays. Now, using NumPy, we can start doing calculations like division, and we can finally compute the earnings per share, which is essentially the amount of profits, the amount of profits for each company divided by the number of shares they have. So the way that I can do it is I create a new variable called earnings per share equal NP earnings divided by NP shares. Okay. And let's say I want to output this earnings per share. Okay. And let's see what we get. Great. So what you find, so this is awesome. So what you find is that after we imported NumPy, we converted the list into arrays. We are now able to get the earnings per share, right? And it makes sense here. 3.2 divided by 2, 1.6. 5.6 divided by 7, 0.8. So if we do a simple gut check, it makes sense. So the moment you use NumPy and convert the list into arrays, you find that you can start doing mathematical operations on the data that you have. But NumPy gives you even more abilities, and let me show you what I mean by that. Suppose I want to know the stocks that have an earning per share over $2, right? So what I can do is I can say print earnings per share over 2. And this is going to return me a bunch of Boolean values. And let me show you what we've got here. Oops. Let's see, we have a small bug here. Okay, wait, I made a mistake here. Okay, this should have been. Okay, great. So when I pass in this statement, I say, look, tell me which stocks have an earning per share more than $2, right? It goes about evaluating each element and it gives me Boolean values. It says 1.6, false, 0.8, false. Both of these elements have an earning per share of more than $2, so it gives me true. Now this is fine, but let's say I want to pick out specifically, I want to get these specific elements. So the way that I go about doing that is I can say, look, push this up here. I can say print. I can subset the array using these Boolean values. That's what I'm going to do right now and take a close look. So I can say earnings per share. I'm subsetting. That's why I open up the square brackets and then I key in this logical condition. So earnings per share needs to be more than $2. Okay. Let's see what happens when we do that. So you see that it returns these specific elements where the earnings per share is more than $2. So that's something that we are able to subset in a more intelligent way using NumPy arrays. So that's something you want to take note of. But beyond that, what you find is that NumPy also allows you to calculate things like the mean, median, and standard deviation. So let me just show you how that works. So imagine, so we have all these, we have the earnings per share for these 4 companies. And let's say I want to calculate the mean earning per share, right? So I go print NP dot mean, and then I key in earnings per share. Okay, and we should get, yeah, it adds it all up and gives you the average. So that's the earnings per share, right? And let's say we want the median number, right? So we go earnings per share, and it should give you the median number. Right, and the median number is 1.86 here. So I don't want to get deep into the statistics here. I mean, just very briefly, what I would say is that a mean, you can think of it in the conventional sense of an average. A median is essentially when you line up all the elements, what is the middle element? The mean doesn't always equal to the median. So in this case, you find that this is the smallest value, this is the second value, this is the third value, this is the fourth value. So the way that we calculate the median here is that it's adding the second and the third value and it's dividing it by 2 because we don't have an odd number of elements here. So that's what's happening here. And we can also calculate the standard deviation. So the way that you do that is you put np dot std earnings per share, right? And then we can get the standard deviation. Okay, so this is the standard deviation. So essentially, I mean, this is just a very broad overview of NumPy. What you find is that the point that I want to get across here is that lists are great, but there are lots of limitations. You can do mathematical operations over them. And that's where NumPy arrays come in really handy, because the moment you convert those lists into arrays, you can start doing mathematical operations like division, multiplication, addition, subtraction. But beyond that, you find that within NumPy, it's just far more suited for statistics. So you can start getting some basic statistical information like your mean, median, and standard deviation. So that's just a very quick overview of the NumPy package. So that's going to lead us to the second exercise, and I'm going to share that with you all on our programming exercises channel. So take 15 minutes. We'll get back around 3:33, and we can discuss this, and then we'll move on and do a very quick overview of the Pandas package. As per request, I'll keep silent and there won't be any background music. So we'll get back 3:33. 3:33. Okay, 5 more minutes and then we'll come back. Okay, start wrapping it up. 3 more minutes and then we'll get back. Okay, 2 more minutes. One more minute and we'll get back. Okay, let's get back to the main screen. All right, so this was kind of similar to the example that I went through, and I just wanted you to go through it so that you have experience manipulating these lists, converting it into NumPy arrays, and so on. So what do we have? So we have 5 companies which earned the following amount in billions, and we also know the number of shares. And what we want to calculate is the earning per share. So that was what we had to do. And the way that we go about doing that is to say, look, let's try to convert the list earning and shares into NumPy arrays first. So the way that we do that is, first of all, we need to import NumPy. So we put import NumPy as NP. So we import that, and then we want to transform this list into an array, right? And the way that we do that is to say, let's say NP, NP earning equal NP dot array over earning. And then we want to do the same thing for the number of shares, equal NP dot array over the shares. Great, have it done. And then we want to create a new variable called earnings per share. Share equal NP earning divided by NP shares. And we want to verify that we did everything correctly. So this is just good practice, just to print out your variables along the way to make sure that you did things right, that you didn't make a mistake. Okay, so this seems to make sense. Good. So we got everything correct here. And the first question is calculate the mean earning per share. So the way that you do that is pretty straightforward. Print np.mean earnings per share. Okay. And then median, same thing, np.median, np earnings per share. Okay. Okay, oops, I made a typo here. Okay, let's run this again. $1.88 is the median. Okay, cool. And then the stretch question, we kind of went through standard deviation, so that wasn't exactly a stretch question. It's print np.std. I didn't realize how funny it was until I said it out loud the previous time. So .std earnings per share. And then we get the standard deviation. We're not going to dive deep into the statistics here, but perhaps in the future we can dive a little further into the statistics, what standard deviation exactly means, what does a tail risk mean, and so on. We can focus on that later. So what we just went through was an application of NumPy. So we have looked at lists, we have looked at NumPy, and now we're going to quickly shift gears a little and look at how you work with data. And the way that you work with data, you to a large extent use this package called Pandas, and that's what we're going to be focusing next. Okay, so let's clear all of this out. Okay, so we use, to a large extent, we're going to be using Pandas to work with files. Pandas allows you to merge files, join files. It allows you to access data using files and so on. So Pandas is great when you have tabular data. So think about a lot of rows and a lot of columns. That's where Pandas comes in really handy. So the way that you go about using Pandas is in the same way that we did for NumPy. We import Pandas first as PD. And then let's just run it to make sure that it's working fine. So this is going to take about 20-30 seconds. So what's happening in the background is that Replit is helping us install this Pandas package. So go ahead, do that. Okay, great. And then you should get this message at the tail end, which says package installation success. Great. And then now, how do we import data? How do we import data? Right. So there are lots of different data sets, the different data formats. One of the formats that's quite prevalent is called CSV. CSV stands for comma separated value. It's just one of the many different formats out there. And if you want to read that data, what you do is you just put data. Let's say we want to create this variable called data frame, right? df equal pd dot read CSV, and then we need to key in the file here, right? So if you are doing, eventually when you do your own data analysis, chances are you have your file in a local environment. You got to key in the location of your file, right? The location of the file has to go in here. But in this case today, we're going to be using a data set from this website called Data World. I'm going to go over there and show you how it works. So this is a specific, so this is a phenomenal website. It has a ton of different data sets to work with. I highly, highly recommend it. Today, we're going to be specifically looking at this data set called Disney Movies Total Gross. So what you do is, let me share that link with everybody here. So I'm sharing this link. Right. So take a look at this website. And specifically, it allows us to download this file as a CSV. And the way that you do that is you click download and you click share URL with the subtitle embed in R or Python. And you copy this line. We have already imported Pandas, so we don't need to import that line. We just need to copy this line. Just go ahead, copy this line. Okay. Okay. And then run it again just to make sure everything is working fine. I'm not too sure if you need to create a profile. Just take a look at the URL. Okay, well, let me just go ahead and share this line of code itself directly. That's better. Yeah, there we go. So I just shared that line of code in our Replit, in our Discord server app. Let me do that on YouTube as well. Yeah, Data World is really, really neat. There are a ton of data sets. And next week, we're going to do an SQL class. And the nice thing about Data World is that it allows you to query the different databases they have using SQL, which is really, really neat. So I just shared the line of code both on our YouTube channel as well as our Discord server. Is it working? Do you have any questions about this? Oh, yeah, it does need an end quote. Sorry, guys. Yeah. Oh, wait a second. Okay, the thing is, Discord takes out the end quote. Okay, wait, give me a sec. One moment. Okay, so the thing is, whenever I try to enter the whole link, Discord, yeah, you have to enter the end quote at the end of the line. You have to do that. For whatever reason, Discord takes that line out when I enter it. And put it on a YouTube channel. So is it working for people? Is it throwing up any errors? Is it working fine? Oh, how does that work? How do I? Okay. All right. So I just want to do a quick check. What's the status update? Is that working or is it? Okay, so people are getting an error. Let's see what's going wrong here. Give me a second. Let me refresh this and try this again. Okay. Let me try this one more time. So if you, okay, so one of the questions I had was what should happen if the line is working? You shouldn't get any error. You should just render properly. And let me just show you it. So add the line and at the same time add this additional line just to make sure that you're able to print out the data. I'll explain what this is later on. Right, so let me share both. So just go ahead, enter the line number 7 as well, just to make sure that you're getting, you have got the data, the right data set. You should see values like this. And if you don't, write a comment and we can. All right, for those who still are having trouble, take a look at our Discord server app. Okay, good. Okay, let me go ahead and share with you my own replit. You can fork it, and then we can continue from there. So let me share this with everybody as well. All right. Any problems, any issues along the way? Is everyone doing okay? Okay, good. So it seems like people are getting it. Excellent. All right, anyone still having issues? Otherwise, we can move on from here. All right, one more minute, and then we can proceed on. Yeah, Karen Jr. Yeah, possibly the first link was an invalid path. Yeah, and I think the way it's formatted as well, things can go awry. That's right. Okay, last 30 seconds. Any issues, anyone? Okay, let's move on. It seems like most of us got the data set here. So when you take a look at this data set, let me explain what's going on here. So you have a bunch of rows, you have different movies, and you have different columns, right? You have the movie title as a column, release date, genre, the rating, the total gross, inflation adjusted gross. So these are different columns. And then you have a bunch of rows. So suppose I want to access all the total gross figures, right? What I do is I just say df, that's the name of the variable. It's called data frame. I put this in, and then what you see is that it prints out the whole set of values. And when you ask what's this type, what's the type of result that I'm getting, right? You can, what you find is the type is a let it load up, right? So the result that we just got there was a series, a Pandas series, right? And let's say we want to convert it into a data frame. The way that you convert a series back into a data frame is to put it in square brackets itself. So if you put this in square brackets, you find is it turns it into a data frame. Okay, awesome, great. And let's say we want to access multiple columns. So the way that we go about doing that is go print df square bracket, square bracket. Let's say I want to get total gross. I want to get that column. And at the same time, let's say I want to get the genre column. Press run. And you get the column output. So that's just using the column and using square brackets to access the data. But in addition to that, you can also use rows to access the data. So let me show you what I mean by that. Let's say I want to access rows 2 through 4. You go print df 2 through 4. And you find that it prints those rows. Awesome. There are lots of different columns, so that's the reason why you don't have all the data printed out here. So using the square bracket, you can access both the columns as well as the rows. But that's kind of limited, because sometimes what you want to do is that you want to be able to access rows and columns together. And the nice thing about Pandas is that it has this method called lock, LOC, or ilock, which is integer-based location, to specifically subset the rows and columns that you want. So when it comes to label-based access, which is lock, you use a string, and ilock stands for integer-based. Use integers to locate the specific sections of the data. For that, you use numbers. But in this case, what you find is that the labels are numbers itself. So in this case, we're just going to use lock, LOC. And let me show you how we can do that. Okay, so we want to access, let's say we want to access rows 1, 2, and 3. So we do print df.lock 1, 2, and 3. Oops. Okay, I need to put it in a data frame. My apologies. Okay. Right, so you have these rows pop out. So what's happening is that it's asking, okay, let me pull out rows 1, 2, and 3. So it goes to the database and says, okay, let me pull out 1, 2, and 3, and let me get the output. So that's using rows, but suppose we want to mix it up. We want to get both. We said, look, the power of lock is that it allows you to pick out using both the rows and the columns. So let's say for these 3 specific results, we want to get the movie title and the total gross amount. So the way that we go about doing that is we go print df.lock square bracket, square bracket, and then we enter the rows that we want to access, and after that we enter the specific columns that we want to access. So in this case, I want to access movie title, and I also want to access the movie. Oops. Right. So just in case you're wondering where I got all these strings, it's based on the data here. Right. I'm using the column labels to extract the data. And let's see what we get when we do this. Right. It's a lot neater. Right. So you get movie title, movie gross. Wait a second. So this is wrong. The reason why I'm getting a NaN here is because there isn't any column called movie gross. There's only a column called total gross. So if I key that in, it should give me the specific total gross. Right? Pinocchio, 84 million. Fantasia, 83 million. Song of the South, 65 million. Does it all make sense? You double check against here. Yep, it tallies up nicely. So that's a way to access data. So the point I want to make here is that you can use square brackets to access data in a data frame using Pandas, but the problem is there are certain limitations. The main being you can't access rows and columns. You can't access the intersection of both, and that's where lock.loc and .ilock come in handy. And in this case, we just kind of went through a very simple example to access data. So that's going to lead us to the third exercise. Give me a second. Let me take this out. Let me share that with you all right now. So I've just shared the third exercise with you all. If you have any questions, post it. Let's take 10 minutes. This is a very simple exercise. Take 10 minutes. Let's work on it and then get back. So I've shared the third exercise on YouTube as well right now. If you're having issues downloading the data, just copy the first two lines from the current replit that you have for this exercise as well. Take about 5 minutes. If you're having issues, now is a good time to ask. Uh, I see a lot of answers streaming in. That's great. Okay, 3 more minutes and then we'll get back. Okay, 2 more minutes, wrap up, and we can get back on track. Okay, let's get back. Let's take a look at what we've got here. Okay. All right, so we want to have the same setup here, and that's that we want to import pandas and create the data frame where we read the CSV file. Let's run this. It's going to take a little while. Okay, let it roll here. Okay, well, it's still working. So the first question was, how do you print the titles of the first 3 movies in the data frame? So the way that you do that is, say, print. Okay, print df dot log square bracket, and then you enter 1, 2, 3, and then you enter the column title, which is movie title. I just want to check if it starts with 0 or starts with zeros. Let me just, okay, it starts with 1. Okay, great. That's good. Okay, and let's print this out. Let's see what we get. Wait a second, let me check this again. Okay, good. So first 3 movies, we printed that out. And let's say we want the movie title, total gross, and genre. So for that, what we do is we go print df.lock square bracket 1 2 3 movie. Okay, we want to square bracket movie title, total gross. We want to enter genre. Okay, let's print that out. Oops. Movie title. Okay, that's something wrong here. Okay, give me 1 second. Okay, let's see. Let's see, movie title. Okay, I'm getting an error here. Movie title, total gross. Okay, let's run this again. Give me 1 second. I'm running up into an error here. Let me try to figure this out. df.lock 1 2 3 movie title. I spelled that right. Total gross. Oh, genre needs to be in format. Okay. Run. Wait a second. It's throwing me an error here. Let me try to figure that out. df. I think it needs to be a comma here. Let's check that. Give me 1 second. I'm getting a syntax error here. I'm trying to figure out why I'm getting it. Movie title is supposed to work here. Total gross, genre. Genre should be in double quotes. That's the. Okay, that seems to be fine. Let's see. Give me 1 sec, guys. I'm getting a weird error, and I'm wondering. This happens quite frequently when you code. You wonder where it went wrong. Just give me 1 moment. Let me try to sort this out. Fuck. I think. Let's see. What if I take this away? Should work fine. Give me a second. Right. Can anyone does anyone spot the syntax error? I'm struggling to figure out what's the reason for this. Oh, it doesn't have its own set of brackets. Okay, let's try that again. Because I did this previously and it worked perfectly fine, so I'm having trouble understanding why this is going on. Oh, is it because genre is not okay? Maybe that's it. Okay, wait, that's it. Is that it? No, I mean genre is now on the same line. It's fine. Okay, in the interest of saving time, I'm going to open up somebody else's solution, right, and explain that instead. Okay, non-standard deviation. Let me get your solution here. Yeah, sorry about that. wondering why. Just give me 1 second. I'm really sorry about this, guys. There was some syntax error that threw me off here. Also, something I want to mention, good catch here. It's that the log needs to, previously I put in 1, 2, 3. That missed out Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. So it's supposed to be 1, 0, 1, 2, 0, 1, and 2. So that's a good catch there. And then over here, what you see is you key in the specific rows that you want, and then you key in the specific columns, movie title, total gross, genre, and then you get the results here. I'm really sorry about the syntax error there. That threw me up there. Okay, so we just quickly went through Pandas and how to access data. I wanted to cover a little bit on how you plot, but I don't think we have time today, so I'm just going to, we can have that class another day. So I want to just wrap this up. Sorry about that syntax error there. So I just want to wrap up by saying what's next. So we have kind of run through 2 sessions of Python. Last week we went through the absolute basics. This week we had a very quick overview of data science packages like NumPy and Pandas. So next week we're going to have a 1-hour class focused on SQL. So we're going to be using the different data sets in Data World, and we're going to be querying right away from the get-go. So it's going to be an hour long. It's going to be an introduction to SQL. A lot of you requested for that class. So next week, 2:30 to 3:30, we're going to have an intro to SQL class. I'll send out the YouTube link subsequently, and you can share it around with your peers. But one of the things that I've been thinking about is what else is after this. So a lot of you have been commenting and chatting with me about how you like these classes and so on, and what are the future classes you want me and my peers to offer. And one of the things that I hope is that we can build this network of peers who can learn and teach each other rather than pay thousands of dollars in General Assembly or other institutions of higher education. I think it's just so much better if we can work together and learn and share and grow as a community. I think it's a lot stronger. And that's something that I really hope to work on. So I have been asking my friends exactly what kind of classes they are interested to teach. So a number of things that popped up were stuff like intro to web development, HTML, CSS, JavaScript, basics of Angular. Somebody was interested to teach how to, how do you apply a blockchain? A friend of mine was even interested to teach basic Spanish. So there are lots of these classes that some of my friends are interested to teach, and some of you have also volunteered to teach new classes. And I think we can spread the word around using our Discord server. But for all of that, I want to get a sense of what you all are interested in. I mean, is the timing right? What are some of the skills that you want to develop further? What are some of the skills that you want to teach others and so on? So that's something that I want to get a sense of. And that's why I'm going to be sending out a survey after this, both on our Discord server app as well as our YouTube channel. So let me just go ahead and do that right now. Just give me 1 second. One moment. Let me share that link on our Discord. So I just shared the survey link. My hope is really I want to understand what you like about these classes, what you dislike about these classes. And based on the feedback, I want to go find new instructors to keep offering these classes. I have really enjoyed sharing with you all. And I want to get a sense of what you are interested in so that we can figure out what's next. But that pretty much kind of caps the second session. I really, really enjoyed teaching both the session last week and this week. And I hope that you offer your feedback through that survey. And if you have any questions, always feel free to send me an email. It's gheepal93@gmail.com. Thank you so much, everybody. I hope this was good. Thank you so much.